Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of the Films Not Movies podcast with me, Arron.
And me, Charlotte.
This week we'll be looking at Manchester by the Sea, which is currently in cinemas, and we'll also be looking back on Hunt for the Wilderpeople, which came out last year. So here we go.
Out now on Netflix.
Oh, yes.
It seems to be everybody we know is just watching it at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's only just come out on Netflix, so it should be in the newly added bits. But yeah, it's got quite a good critical reception last year, so I think people were excited to watch that one.
Yeah. So the first film we're going to talk about is Manchester by the Sea. So this was directed by Kenneth Lonergan, who wrote Gangs of New York, and it stars Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams. So the film really very much centres around Casey Affleck's character, who's called Lee Chandler, and it's about the impacts on his life, really, when his brother dies, and then he finds out completely unexpectedly that his brother expects him to look after his young son, Patrick, who's sort of a teenager, about sort of 16.
Yeah, that kind of age. Yeah, so it's apparent quite early on that Lee Chandler's character is quite a complicated soul, to say the least. He seems very disengaged from the world, I think, from how he's portrayed in the opening parts of the film.
Yeah, it's sort of complicated in that you can tell there's turmoil going on under the skin, but to all intents and purposes, it's a very simple life that he's living, and it's really quite a character piece around him. And at the beginning, you don't really understand why he is the way that he is and all his motivations in life.
Yeah, because I think to start with, it does seem like he's just a bit petulant and a bit like he's...
a bit grumpy and hates people.
Like he hasn't ever grown up properly and like thinks that the world is against him, so he's just grumpy for the sake of it. So
he doesn't care about anything.
I do find at the start of the film it's quite hard to kind of sympathise with why he seems to be being so unreceptive of his brother's son. I guess his nephew would be the easy way of saying that, and seems almost not unaffected by his brother's death, because everyone goes through these things differently, but he does seem very detached from the situation that is going on around him.
Yeah, I mean, he seems a guy that has his own way of dealing with things, and so you sort of see him dealing with his brother's death in his own way, where he allows himself not too much emotional outpouring and is just bottling all up and carrying on, really. So the film really is an exploration of his character, and as the film goes on, they use a lot of flashbacks, which I thought were really effective, actually. Sometimes quite quick little flashbacks, jumping straight back to just a very short scene, and over time you kind of understand his story and how he's come to be where he is, which affects how he feels and the things that he goes through when he's asked to look after Patrick and move back to where he came from and all that kind of thing. So
yeah, I think the flashbacks are very, very elegantly placed in throughout the film. Normally, I'm not a big fan of a film that relies on flashbacks to tell the story, but as it kind of it just unfolds a part of the current timeline, which makes you wonder about some parts of the past. And sometimes it'll slot in the corresponding part from the past, and sometimes it doesn't. And then we'll show you that later, and it'll make some of what has happened earlier in the film, all of a sudden, it's just like piecing it together, but it all flows very naturally.
Yeah, I really liked it, and sort of how it explained his different relationships with people. So with his nephew Patrick, they jump back to the time when they were on a boat together and Patrick was just a kid, and how they're all having a laugh. And it does explain, even though because he doesn't give out a lot, it's not a very effervescent character that shows what he's feeling, but it does kind of give you a good impression of the love that he's got with other people and all the good times that they've had as well. So, cause obviously, if you've seen the trailer for this, you'll know that this is a sad film. It's billed as a sad film. We were expecting a sad film. And we'd actually, because of the films that we're going to see at the moment, I felt like I'd seen the trailer for this quite a lot. And the trailer I found quite moving. I'd find myself almost in tears watching the trailer. So I knew that it was going to be quite a sad film. But what I will say is there's key points in the story that are not revealed from the trailer, because I kind of felt like I had quite a good gist of what it was all about, but there's some really, really key parts of the story which you don't know from the trailer, which are integral to the film and make it what it is, really.
Yeah, I think the trailer, I was annoyed with the trailer when I first saw it because it felt like it was giving too much of the game away. But actually, I found that the scenes that are used in the trailer are portrayed quite differently in the film, whereas even some of the bits that seem really tragic in the trailer are actually funny little moments. I thought, I think it's only one in particular that is actually it's almost a humorous scene. Well, it's certainly...
I found that humorous in the trailer, though, when I watched it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, for me, that seemed like that was going to be a real turning sad point, not a funny little bit. So,
and there is humour in this film, and that is one of you can't make an unrelentingly sad film. You know, there's a lot of humour both in the flashbacks and in the relationship with Lee Chandler and Patrick.
Yeah, and I think the placement of the humour is, there is loads more in it than I was expecting.
Yeah.
And the film isn't even if you took the humorous parts away, isn't overwhelmingly sad like I was expecting.
Yeah.
Obviously, the tone of it, and as the other developments happen in the film, it's a very sad subject matter, and you understand the position of nearly everyone in this film, but I don't feel like there's no kind of overwhelming feeling of, oh my god, as you're going through it, or dread, or I certainly didn't get that feeling.
Yeah, and generally in everything, all sad films, there's always an element of comic relief because you need it. You know, that's why after a funeral you go to the pub and you have a laugh, because at that point you really need it. You need to kind of bounce back from some of the sad things, and that is really well used within this film. I feel like this is probably a good time to talk about the music, because I feel this is really connected for me.
Yes, well, my opinion on the music was that I thought it was all pretty good, and they used music, again, quite sparingly, but they used, apart from the one scene that I know you're going to talk about, I felt like it was all quite interestingly placed, where the main pieces of music were almost just to the cityscapes and just the scenery with music, with usually...
Or driving from A to B. And
they were almost transitional shots.
Yeah.
And I thought the music choice in those bits, even though they reused one bit a second time, I thought they were very nice little pieces that fit the mood very well.
Kind of like choral, a cappella-y type, but modern sounding.
Yeah, those music choices conveyed the overall feeling of the film, or certainly how it was making me feel quite well. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I agree. I did like the fresh music that was used in it, and it did capture that sort of melancholic mood rather than an absolute gut-wrenchingly sad mood. What I wanted to say, and that what reminded me was talking about the comic relief, is that you cannot make an unrepentingly sad film all the way through with no light and shade, and I feel like the music was used to that effect as well. There's a very key scene in it which you would expect to be almost the saddest possible part in it, and this is the part that we're not going to spoil and isn't referred to at all in the trailers. And the choice of music is a really well-known piece of classical music. You might not know the name of it. I didn't know the name of it. Apparently it's Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. But as soon as you hear it, you'll recognise it massively because it's been used all over the shop. And I started to feel really angry watching that scene, because I was feeling that this should be such a sad, terribly sad moment. And they're using this almost hackneyed piece of music that I felt made me feel detached from what I was watching, because of just how almost cliched that piece of music was. However, in the course of the film, I understood why they'd used it, because, it would have almost been too sad if they'd used incredibly sad music at that point. But then also, it's about his character and how he's had to push down all of his emotions and couldn't possibly be fully involved in all of it because it's just too much for anybody to deal with. And then throughout the film, there's little moments where he allows his emotions to surface from different encounters with different people. And the same for the lad Patrick, who's lost his father. He kind of pushes it down, and then his emotions surface every now and again. As grief, that is what happens. You know, it's not a constant one feeling. You do get on with it for a bit, and then you're like, it overwhelms you. That's how they use the music and use the scene, so that you don't go through this amazingly awful, cataclysmic grief and sorrow. It's sort of, you feel a bit detached while that is happening, and then at those moments where they have this release of emotion, you go through that too at that same time. And once I understood that in the fullness of the film, I was like, actually, it makes perfect sense now, this music choice. But at the time, I felt
annoyed.
Yeah, really annoyed that they'd done this with this piece of music, with what was going on.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with how not necessarily just that piece of music, but the whole point about, you do almost feel detached alongside the characters, apart from the moments of emotional release, which I do feel like you feel it at the same time as them, especially with Casey Affleck's character. And I found that quite different to what I was expecting from the film. I mean, I had heard a couple of reviews before going into this. I'd usually try and avoid reviews for ones that I know I'm going to see, but it just didn't work out like that this time. And I'd heard people saying, oh, don't take a tissue with you, take a box of tissues with you. But I don't feel like it quite had that emotional effect on me. I don't think I actually, and I'm always crying in films and cry at anything, I don't think I shed a tear once during it, but I still found like I connected to it quite well. But I don't. For me, it didn't have that kind of... I think it's because it didn't seem like the music or anything was really trying to force the emotion out of you like you get a lot. I managed to just...
You've got to respect that about this film, actually, because I really hate the feeling of being emotionally manipulated by scenes and TV adverts, and, you know, it drives me mad, really, because I feel like I'm being played, whereas this seemed very natural, and I did get upset, but at those points where the characters were going through those emotions at the time, I thought the performances were brilliant. I thought he was brilliant.
Well, I think this is an interesting point to make about Michelle Williams. I think it's a good time to talk about someone who, when introducing the film, basically billed it as the film with Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams in it. But you think of the film, well, after you've seen the film, and this is no spoiler, but she's barely in this film, but when she is in it, she's probably got like 5 scenes.
Yeah.
But when she is in it,
she's amazing.
Well, she acts amazingly, in my opinion. She's also so crucial to his story, and their story together starts to fill in the gaps of what is
flashbacks
of what is really going on.
The character of Patrick, the son, Lee Chandler's nephew, he's fantastic as well, and I think he's extremely natural as a boy of that age. Kind of was a fairly, I felt, realistic portrayal of a teenage life, you know, compared to some of the daft high school type parties with the big red cups and all that kind of thing. It was much more realistic portrayal, I thought, and the emotions and what's important to him, and that sort of insular view you have when you're that age, when it's sort of all about you, which that's just what you feel like. Which
is completely understandable, because his dad has just died, and then he's getting on with high school life in quite a... To start with, everyone was just like, God, he's detached. But then it all starts to make sense about how things are building up for him and how his own coping mechanisms are. And yeah, so Patrick's played by Lucas Hedges, who is a newcomer, because I think he probably is about the age of the person who's playing, maybe slightly older. And this is an interesting little tidbit that apparently, I don't know if this is completely true, but I'd heard that originally Matt Damon was supposed to play the lead character of Lee Chandler. And now you can almost see the kid Patrick has a little bit more of a resemblance to Matt Damon. I know he's meant to be his uncle.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's definitely what happened or if there were a couple of them were up for it. But I really can't imagine it now with Matt Damon in it, because I think whether Casey Affleck does a brilliant performance or if it's just a role that's perfectly designed that perfectly fits his acting style, which I think it's probably more likely the second. The few things I've seen him in, he's played a pretty similar character to this. Yeah, I think that suits really well, but I did find that really fascinating.
Yeah,
it was originally...
He does look a bit like him. Yeah, I do think Casey Affleck portrayed this character perfectly, and, you know, without that, this film wouldn't work. And, yeah, Michelle Williams, I mean, there's a scene, which is... bit of it is in the trailer, where the two of them are talking in the street and she's got a baby buggy. It is just one of the best scenes ever, and if you saw the dialogue written down,
it would look like nothing.
It's really just a lot of stopping and starting, but it was one of the most genuinely emotional scenes, really, and really quite realistic in terms of how people speak to each other.
Because as you say, you mentioned the dialogue, and it does feel really natural dialogue of people who know each other so well, but are struggling to speak to each other in this particular circumstance. But still completely
understand each other because they're coming from the same place.
Yeah, their interactions are very genuine and very believable, and I think that is, as you say, such a huge credit to this film.
Yeah, it was quite a long film.
Yes, I think it clocks in at just under 2.5 hours, and normally that's a bit of a warning light for me, because there is a real trend. I think we're maybe moving away from it a bit at the moment, for films to be long for the sake of being long.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of unrelated examples are the length of all the Hobbit films are all about 3 hours each. Wolf of Wall Street was about 3 hours long. Silence has just come out. We've not seen that, but that's about 3 hours and has not been well received because of the length. I think a lot of people have liked the film, but I don't think the length has been anything to do with why it's been well received by some. Whereas with this, I didn't feel like the length affected it at all. And I think there were some aspects of the story I could have actually sat with for another half an hour or so, to be honest. Whether it would have made it a better film, but I was definitely intrigued enough that I could have sat with it longer.
Exactly the same.
And I didn't feel like... Normally when a film is too long, I come out of it thinking, God, that would have been brilliant if it was half an hour shorter.
Yeah.
I don't think it is a detraction on this one.
No, I didn't even realise it had been a long film until we got in the car and looked at the time, I was like, oh, whoa, because I was just fully engrossed in it and it didn't seem to drag at any point. You're fully absorbed in the lives of these people. Yeah, so I thought it was very well done.
Excellent. It's rating time. What do you think, Charlotte?
Well, I am really struggling with our marks out of 5, and I really wish we'd given ourselves 10 to make it easy on ourselves. But I know
I'm starting to think that we hadn't gone for ratings at all, but now we've started, I think we should stick with it.
Yeah. I feel like it was a really good film and I loved it. I don't know if it's going to be a sort of all-time favourite for me. So I think I'm going to give it a 3 on the premise that 3 is good. And
a recommendation.
I've reviewed a lot of things I've liked at 3, which leaves in my head 4 to be really loved it, and 5 a sort of once in a blue moon.
Something very special.
Yeah, unlikely to be improved upon.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it 3. Before going into this, it's the tainting of already hearing some reviews and people raving about it so much. I'd heard people saying 5-star, if this isn't in their top 5 films of the year, at the end of the year, they'll be amazed. So I was thinking, right, this is going to be it. I think that's why I was so keen to see it above other things this week. But something about it, even though we praised it all the way through, something about it just didn't quite connect with me as much as I was expecting. And again, is that the expectation going in? A bit, but I found myself coming out of it thinking, right, how can I justify giving this 5 stars? I was like, wait, I shouldn't just give it 5 stars because I think it should have 5 stars. What do I really think? And I think 3 is exactly how I feel about it, because I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend people go and see it if it sounds like your type of thing, because a really well-made drama is hard to come by at the moment. I think a lot of films think they're a well-made drama, but not many of them are. But yeah, it's not going to stick with me in the long term, even though I found myself thinking about it a bit this week. I've not been... Yeah, I feel like it's just going to drop off my radar quite soon. It's not one I think there'll be any value in really revisiting.
Yeah, I agree. And I do feel, obviously, reviewing films is a completely subjective thing. It's 100% subjective. But also it's hard not to be influenced by the mood of films, really. And I am allowing myself for that to affect my score, in that Sing Street, I gave it 4 because I just felt completely energised by it and completely changed my mood, and I would watch it again and just feel happy to watch it. But is that just because it's that kind of a film, it's a feel-good film? Whereas this has got a very sort of cool, melancholic mood, so you're not as involved and invested, and doesn't feel like it's going to be a part of your life sort of a film. So I feel like that is affecting my scores, rightly or wrongly, but that's the way I'm doing it. So
yeah. So it's 3s all round for that one.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so the second film we're going to talk about is Hunt for the Wilderpeople. As we mentioned in the introduction, this film came out last year, which is 2016, and is directed by Taika Waititi. Does that sound about right? You know how I am with names. He directed What We Do in the Shadows, which was a comedy vampire film from 2014, and also Eagle vs. Shark, which starred Jermaine Clement of Flight of the Conchords. So if you know any of these people, we realise that the theme here is that they're all from New Zealand, and this film, again, is set in New Zealand with
a New Zealand
cast. Which includes Sam Neill, who I don't think I knew was from New Zealand.
No,
but
I didn't know.
I think he is. Well, I'm not sure about the accent, so maybe he's not got that accent naturally, but he definitely has a connection to there. Anyway, so it stars Sam Neill, who plays Heck or Hector, and Julian Dennison, who plays Ricky. The basic summary of the film is that Ricky is a kid of about, how old is he? About 12? I think he's
something
quite
like
young.
that. Yeah, quite young.
Who was fostered by a couple in I was going to say the New Zealand outback, but I don't think it's called the outback, it's just called the bush, isn't it?
Yeah, they live out in the sticks, in the complete middle of nowhere, sort of live a sort of homestead type life where they shoot for the dinner and that kind of thing. And this chubby little kid has had all kinds of foster homes and been passed from pillar to post, and nobody really wants him, and he's, a total handful. And it's the lady that plays the woman from the foster home is absolutely hilarious when that's how it opens, really, is he's dropped off.
Yeah, he's dropped off. In
the middle of nowhere, and she's just absolutely hilarious in the sort of, you're on your own now kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it just sets the tone for the humour, really. I was laughing from the off at that very first scene. Thought it was brilliant.
This is where this film is real strength is the quality of the humour. It's very witty, it's very quick. There's tons of little one-liners. So if if you like that type of thing, but the one-liners are all very naturally just fit into conversation, very deadpan. No one else is laughing, and they're just kind of pulling faces as these often quite absurd one-liners are coming out, but they just fit them in just in the natural speech patterns and just the funny little moments of hopelessness by characters where they're just a bit useless and stuff is all adds to the hilarity.
Yeah, and obviously we're kind of big fans of Flight of the Conchords, and we've also seen both What We Do in the Shadows and Eagle versus Shark, and it's something about the accent. I feel like it's almost comparing it to the time when Peter Kay got really big and people who didn't know anyone from Bolton just heard a Bolton accent and found it funny because that was just the Peter Kay accent, whereas I knew loads of people from Bolton and it was just the Bolton accent. So it's probably a bit of a sweeping statement, but maybe it's something about the deadpanness of the delivery that just so funny. I
think that is doing a disservice to the quality of the jokes.
Completely, but it just sort of...
It adds to it, because it is so unusual for us to hear. And, I mean, if you ever hear, like, an oceanic accent, it's normally... Is that the right... That's not even the right place, is it?
I think so.
Oh, well, whatever it is. It's normally Australian, and it's similar to Australian, but just has that extra little
it's just that whole sense... It's the same sort of sense of humour of What We Do in the Shadows, etc. Really, that sort of... It's not outrageous, it's silly, just, really tickles your funny bone, or it certainly does for me.
Yeah, so the film basically descends quite quickly into a relationship between Ricky and Heck, Sam Neill's character, where he is left in a position of looking after Ricky.
He's this real grumpy old man character, which he plays perfectly. So really it's all about the relationship between this grumpy old man who doesn't want to be left looking after this kid, and then this rebellious, hilarious kid who thinks he's sort of some Mr. Big Stuff from the city.
Yeah, he's got a real gob on him, this kid, but in a really hilarious way.
But completely endearing, and both of them are. All the characters are just really lovable characters. It's just that kind of film.
They pitch the characters just right, whereas it would have been so easy for the kid to be massively unlikable, and you didn't feel sorry for him, or not even feel sorry for him, but didn't connect to him, didn't want him to do well. But they just pitch him quite right, where he is. You can tell what a hard worker he is, but you can't help but like him because he's almost like a mini Cartman, is how I described him, but without the horrible side, basically. But still a lot of the same.
Cartman meets the kid from Up.
Yes, I can see that. So definitely in terms of looks, anyway. Yeah, so they basically spend the majority of the film in the bush, surviving, getting up to no good, getting into japes and scrapes.
Yeah, some quality montage work.
Yeah.
Which you gotta love.
Yeah, great, funny use of music. One scene in particular where he's watching an advert on TV and how that music plays in properly had me honking with laughter, which even in funny films, there's not many bits where I really do laugh out loud. So this film definitely delivered a few of them. But then it's not just funny film, it's not just a throwaway comedy. The way the relationship grows between Ricky and Heck is really well done, where they go from being Hector's so standoffish with Ricky, and they just kind of learn to appreciate each other.
Yeah, through necessity.
Through hilarity, really.
Yep. I think you've kind of got to mention the role of the scenery as well in it. You know, the actual landscape of the bush is just, it's amazing, isn't it?
It's breathtaking.
It does kind of open with those kind of amazing scenes of how green it is and beautiful it is, and that is a real part of the film. Wouldn't really work without the role that plays. Yeah, I
definitely found like the film knew how good these shots were and often lingered on them for quite a long time in between shots, which I wasn't complaining because obviously it
really helped. I think
amazing, but I found that they were really.
Maybe the New Zealand Tourist Board kind of chipped in a bit. I don't know, but it looked amazing.
That's a good point.
There's some funny cameos as well. So Rhys Darby pops up as a hilarious cameo character. Rhys Darby of Flight of the Conchs fame.
Plays Murray, in the manager in Flight of the Conchords, and has appeared in a few other things, but he's just such a hilarious character. So when his character is so ludicrous and does pop up in this, is just...
He pulls it off where probably nobody else could.
Yeah, he's definitely got the right tone for it.
And there's also a cameo by Taika Waititi himself, the director, playing there's a a scene in a church and he plays a minister. And I kind of thought he's almost going for Peter Cook in Princess Bride levels of ridiculousness, you know, the marriage scene.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not quite going to top that in terms of ridiculous ministers, but he had a good crack at it.
He had a good go. And yeah, he's pretty impressed with the films that he's put out so far. And I think this is just a continuation in the quality levels of Eagle versus Shark and What We Do in the Shadows, which I think were both really funny. And this continues that. I mean, it's hard to talk about this film without really talking about, I mean, we've talked about the humour loads, but it's primarily a comedy film with the other aspects of the storyline help it along. But it did feel quite refreshing in, I think we've seen quite a few, well, maybe not La La Land last week, but generally we watch quite serious films. So seeing something that was a real good romp essentially was good fun. And there's a surprising amount of action in this film. It just descended into almost an action film by the end. And just that kid, I mean, Julian Dennison, I've not seen him in anything else. Again, similar to Manchester by the Sea, Patrick's character, not seen him in anything else, but I can see this kid becoming a staple of comedy films for a while. He's got the right look, he's got the delivery. I don't know how you get a kid to... Some of the one-liners...
Perfectly natural, never... At any point did you feel like it was hammy or... There's
a scene with him and a gun, which, again, properly had me laughing out loud so much I think I had to rewind it just to watch it again. It was so stupid and just really brilliant.
But it's interesting, we didn't sort of plan this, the common theme between these two films when we chose them, but they kind of both are about a relationship between a boy and a surrogate father type, and how they're kind of thrust together through strange circumstances and how they deal with it and how the relationship evolves. So it's quite interesting to compare the two because there are quite similarities in that way.
It would seem like we'd planned that there was this situation, but I knew so little about Hunt for the Wilderpeople that I didn't know that was the story before going in. So then the surrogate father theme is so key to both of these films.
Completely.
In other aspects of these films, probably couldn't be much further apart, but you can definitely draw comparisons.
Sad elements as well, though. I mean, obviously, it's a lot more to the forefront of Manchester by the Sea, but there's sad moments in this. And I also did feel at once this sad scene in Hunt for the Wilderpeople that I kind of got annoyed at that as well, that I wasn't allowed to feel sad for long enough because I kind of wanted to absorb what had happened. So I would have liked just a little bit, a couple more minutes to absorb that before they went straight back into the comedy part of it. I know they were intentionally trying to keep it light, but that was just my one gripe.
Yeah, that seems fairly fair. It wasn't something that particularly I noticed, but looking back, I can totally see that.
So yeah, I mean, it is a much more straightforward film to talk about.
And to talk about it too much else would be giving away plot points. I mean, in the comedy film, the plot points aren't that important, but a lot of the revelations are some of the funniest bits. So I think
just go and see it.
It's pretty good. So I'm going to make you give your rating first again on this one.
I'm going to give it a 4.
A 4?
Yeah. And I know that, like Sing Street, it is a much more straightforward film, but I feel like it really warmed my cockles and I would like to watch it again, watch it time and time again. And maybe that's how I'm kind of judging these as to whether they will be part of my life going forward, like my all-time favourites, whether I will want to spend more time with them. So
I think that's a really good way of judging a film, really, to see how much you really like it, because there are films that I would say are some of my top films that I don't watch that often, whereas there are ones that I think, I just quite enjoy that, you wouldn't mind just chucking it on. So maybe that is a good way of judging these ones. But for me, it's going to be a 3 for me. I think it loses its way a bit as the film goes on. I think if it started as strongly as it does in the first, if it carried on as strongly as it did in the first, maybe 45 minutes, not that it drags on or gets...
it could have been trimmed a little bit or gets as good.
Or loses. The comedy, I think, is pretty consistent all the way through. I just feel like some of the story choices feels like they're padding it out a bit just to hit an hour and a half running length, really. And I did find myself not getting bored, but I just feel like it tails off towards... maybe not even the middle. I think the ending is a bit odd and I don't really think it fit. The very ending is good, but the main resolution to the main plot seemed a bit weak for me. So it's funny and I'll definitely watch it again. I'm probably more likely to watch it again than Manchester by the Sea, but I suppose I've given both of them 3. So definitely a recommendation, and I think this did appear on a lot of people's top 5 films of 2016 list, so obviously people did really enjoy it, and it is really funny. But for me, I can't give it more than a 3.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's this week's episode. Hope you've enjoyed. As always, here come the plugs. So you can follow us at FNM Pod. Please rate us on iTunes, subscribe on iTunes, and if you write a review on iTunes, which helps us a lot, we'll read it out, which will be fun. So
yeah,
if you want to get a mensch, give us a review.
That's it. And we're on Facebook now as well. If you search for Films Not Movies podcast, you'll find us on there.
Yes, a shiny new Facebook page. Excellent.
Cool. Thanks for listening, guys.
See you next time.
Bye.